I'm taking complete risk speaking up, but I really feel it's the right thing to do. It was a lot of spin, and behind the scenes was a complete dumpster fire in motion.
Tech giant Nuix was the hottest stock market float of 2020, but within months, shareholders lost billions, and the scandals and legal actions began to pile up.
Technology company Nuix is at the centre of an insider trading investigation by the corporate watchdog.
3 years on, attention is turning to the role of the corporate regulator and its slowness to act. Nuix designs software used by enforcement agencies to catch the crooks. The AFP, ATO, Asic, Homeland Securities in the United States, they all use it.
Nuix see the bigger picture. With continual investment in research and development, Nuix technology is one step ahead of criminals.
But behind the slick marketing spin, some former insiders describe a culture built on silence and subterfuge.
Nuix got great people and great technology. The problem is culture. There's a culture of silence. Stand in line, do what you're told.
Rolf Krolke joined Nuix in 2018 as Global Vice President, running its second biggest division, Technology Services. A year later, he and a group of executives blew the whistle to the board on wrongdoings.
We tried to fix it, but that was essentially quashed. We've tried, we tried, but to no avail.
Krolke is speaking publicly for the first time, appalled by the fallout from one of the most scandalous floats in a decade.
Emails, forensic images.
When Nuix decided to list the company on the share market in 2020, Krolke saw the prospectus and was deeply concerned.
I looked at one of the sections and what we had to deliver, and I thought to myself, how are we going to turn the Titanic away from an iceberg?
A prospectus is a legal document outlining financial forecasts and future prospects for potential investors. When you first read it, what was your impression?
I was really taken aback at how they had positioned the organisation from what it was to actually what we could deliver.
What was it designed to do?
It was designed to continue the hype that was going around about the IPO, to bring in as many investors as possible and essentially lift the share price up from where it listed.
Mark Allen has been a corporate lawyer for decades. In 2020, a client who worked at Nuix contacted him.
He telephoned me somewhat out of the blue to say that he was under some pressure. He had had concerns about corporate governance matters, tax compliance matters, and they didn't like what he was saying. He was then terminated, and that's when we really started working together quite closely.
When the prospectus was issued, enticing shareholders to buy the stock, Allen fired off a series of letters to Australia's corporate watchdog Asic on behalf of his client. What was the overriding message that he was saying?
Beware, you need to look at this. This was the biggest float of 2020. It involved big players, and when they got a note from someone formally inside the company, they should have mobilised themselves.
Asic made a call, but not to Allen's client.
One of the things we understand they did when they got our letter was to ring the law firm acting for Nuix to say, is there anything we should be worried about here? It's a bit like, you know, some drug dealers doing a deal in the back of a restaurant. You as a customer report it, and the police phone the cafe owner and say, is there anything bad going on there?
The Asic review was handed to a junior.
The intern would have been well out of their depth trying to navigate such a complicated document. The other issue at the time was that the manager, apparently in charge of the review, was desperate to get on holidays. Christmas was coming up.
How would you describe Asic's response to those letters?
I think it was bordering on contemptuous.
The company proceeded to list on December 4, and the next few weeks the share price shot up, then tanked suddenly in February when its financial results fell short of the hype. You were there when the shares crashed.
Yes.
How did you feel?
I felt sick. Watching all these people that were getting on the bandwagon as it rocketed up, and then it just fell off a cliff.
The shares kept falling as Nuix issued 2 downgrades to its forecasts. What was it like inside the company when that was going on?
Well, it was bad. There was lots of anger. There was lots of yelling and screaming and pressure on everyone to turn this thing around as fast as we could.
And could you?
No.
Why not?
No, we just didn't have the runway to do it. We didn't have the time.
Asic could have delayed the listing, but it let it go ahead.
My client has calculated that $3 billion of value has been lost. I tend to look more at the actual loss that was suffered by the mum and dad investors who invested in this. And basically $1 billion was transferred from that class of investor, to the wealthy individuals behind the float.
Nuix's largest shareholder, Macquarie Group, pocketed $550 million from a partial sell-down through the float. A small group of executives and founders also became rich.
The failure of Asic to appropriately regulate Nuix's IPO has had catastrophic consequences for all investors except for Macquarie Bank, the Nuix and Macquarie executives in the know, and offshore banks in tax-friendly Vanuatu and Switzerland. This sorry Nuix episode has been a complete failure by Asic. It must never be repeated.
A month after Senator Deborah O'Neill made that speech, and following a lot of media exposure, Asic finally contacted Alan's client.
From memory, it took until July before I got a call, but that was 8 months after the listing. The horse had bolted, the damage had been done. It was far, far too late.
7 months after Alan's first warning letter, Asic revealed it was investigating Nuix's prospectus. Around the same time, Asic started to examine allegations of insider trading by its then CFO, Stephen Doyle. Krolker was there when the offices were raided.
They came in and, along with the AFP, and seized a number of documents, hard drives, computers, and then electronic files. It shocked everyone. It shocked our customers as well. And that was probably one of the hardest things, was managing the customer base because of what the software does, which is, find the bad people.
As the scandals racked up and 3 class actions were launched, Nuix installed a new CEO, Jonathan Rubinstein, and promised a new beginning.
I'm fairly excited about where we've come, and we've got a long way to go, but very excited about what we do.
So what changed?
Nothing. Just a different spin. The toxicity remained, the fear remained, people didn't know what was going on. The old culture at Nuix ran on scandal, intimidation and threats, and then the new culture runs on nepotism, gaslighting, and there's more spin that comes out of that company than a washing machine on high.
In February 2022, Asic quietly dropped its investigation into whether the prospectus had misled shareholders. Asic said it conducted a comprehensive investigation and found insufficient evidence of unlawful conduct.
I suppose a part of me said, I'm not surprised. We expected that Asic wasn't about to say, oh, we were at fault, we should have done something, but they should have done something.
Asic then dropped its insider trading investigation into CFO Stephen Doyle, citing insufficient evidence of unlawful conduct after completing its investigation. But it did decide to sue Nuix for continuous disclosure breaches, which Nuix is fighting. Asic is also investigating purchases of Nuix shares made by the new CEO in September. For Rolf, it was the last straw. He quit last October and is now working for a competitor.
I was tired. It was time to go. I needed a change. I needed to get away from the nepotism and gaslighting that was going on.
Nuix declined an interview, but maintains its prospectus was entirely appropriate. It denied any cultural issues and said Nuix continues to pursue a turnaround under fresh leadership, with its most recent financial results demonstrating a return to growth.
Well, the very point of this inquiry was because we have a major problem with white-collar crime in Australia.
Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg is chairing a parliamentary inquiry into Asic because he thinks it's failing to do its job as an enforcer.
There are a litany of white-collar crimes which are well documented in the newspapers and in the media almost every day, where Asic does not pursue criminal and civil penalties, and as a result, this fuels the confidence of white-collar criminals.
Bragg launched the inquiry last October and is using Nuix as one of a few case studies into how it conducts its investigations.
It's a black box. So that is going to be one of the key parts of this review, is understanding why Asic doesn't take an action when they have received a lot of inside information.
Getting Asic to hand over key documents has been a battle.
I think they've pushed it harder than any other agency I can think of to try and interfere with the parliamentary process, and that is highly improper. But ultimately, the Senate has come together on this and has said that we won't cop any interference and we will require you to disclose the documents that we need to see.
There needs to be a clear light shined on this to find out what went wrong. Because it's not just Nuix, there's been lots of other examples where Asic has really not done anything, even though there's been terrible, bad corporate behaviour.
For decades, Asic has been accused of being a toothless tiger, too timid and too slow to act.
If I achieve one thing in my time in the Senate, Mr Acting Deputy President, it is to see that Asic, the oversight of these people, carries out its duties much, much better than it's done in the past.
Former National Senator John Williams is a long-time critic of Asic. He was instrumental in getting a royal commission into the banks and a Senate inquiry into Asic.
It was basically 10 years trying to get Asic to be a feared regulator, to be someone of action, an organisation of action, and to do their job to the expectations of the Australian people. Unfortunately, I failed. If Asic was doing their job properly, there would not be another inquiry into them now.
Williams, who is retired but still helps victims of white-collar crime, says Australians need Asic to do its job.
Because of the inaction of Asic, thousands of Australians have lost so much money, their livelihoods, their standard of living, because of shonky products and shonky observation and policing of those products. And this is where Asic, I think, have failed dismally over many, many years. This is why I keep asking questions. Why is Asic so slow? Why are they so timid? They simply don't perform like they should.
Corporate governance and regulatory academic Helen Bird says Asic is chronically underfunded.
I think the government has always underfunded Asic, and therefore it's made it hard for it to balance its various activities.
Bird sits on an Asic consultative committee with members that include Asic's chair and commissioners.
The other issue, I think, is the law itself, which is incredibly complicated. And all of that combines to make the job of corporate regulation in this country quite complicated.
There are calls for a radical overhaul of Asic, which could include narrowing its remit.
For ASIC, there are two parts to the job. There's the enforcement of the law, but the other is the transactional day-to-day work it does. It's important to cooperate to get that transactional work done. And yet they're the same people who could potentially be the subject of enforcement actions. I think it's really unfair to force the regulator have to deal with this constant tension.
Williams isn't sure a restructure will solve everything.
My message to ASIC is clear. Get off your backsides, you've got the funding, you've got the resources, do your job and go after the crooks and protect the Australian people.
Krolker hopes by speaking up, the truth will finally come out and ASIC will finally do its job.
But this is a great example of a disaster that occurred right under them. And what I really want to get out there is how we stop that, how we support our regulators and government agencies to stop this from occurring.